An industry insider revealed seldom discussed details about the long-standing rivalry between Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, stating that the surface-level truce between them lacked sincerity and was more a calculated move than a heartfelt reconciliation. The source made it clear that Tom Cruise's competitiveness had not faded over the years, even as both actors maneuvered through decades of Hollywood stardom and box office battles. According to the insider, when Cruise appeared at the premiere of Brad Pitt's F1 drama during the summer and even shared a hug with his longtime rival on the red carpet, it left many observers stunned, as it appeared to signify a new, friendlier chapter between the two superstars. However, beneath the public display, the source insisted that the gesture was planned for strategic reasons, not as a sign of genuine friendship. The source explained that the so-called making up between Tom and Brad was driven primarily by business interests, as the two were essentially using each other's celebrity status to generate extra buzz for their respective projects. The insider said that these carefully orchestrated moments were more about boosting their own profiles and leveraging each other's audience than about squashing any real personal animosity. The source pointed out that Cruise, despite the outward show of camaraderie, never truly lets go of his need to compete and always keeps one eye on the Hollywood landscape for potential threats to his standing. The rivalry, the insider suggested, was never resolved in a personal sense, but simply repackaged for mutual benefit in the public eye. Subscribe for more exclusive Hollywood stories. The insider further explained that, while Cruise and Pitt may have found a way to coexist publicly and draw attention to their latest ventures, Tom's competitive instincts were simply redirected when a new star emerged. According to the source, Pedro Pascal, who recently rose to prominence as one of Hollywood's favorite leading men, had now become the focus of Cruise's irritation. The insider outlined that, although Pedro Pascal was only slightly younger than Cruise, the industry was treating him as a fresh new face, and this shift in attention was something that did not sit well with Tom. The source described how Cruise had always seen himself and Brad Pitt as the defining icons of their generation, but now he was watching as the spotlight turned to Pascal, who was being celebrated as if he were the industry's next big thing. This new dynamic, the source said, had stirred up a sense of annoyance in Cruise, who was unaccustomed to being overshadowed by what he perceived as a relative newcomer. The source explained that Cruise viewed the Hollywood landscape as a competitive arena, and anyone who was gaining momentum or being hailed as a breakout star was automatically on his radar. The insider remarked that Cruise had never been able to fully step away from his need to be at the top, and now that someone like Pedro Pascal was being embraced by audiences and critics alike, Tom felt compelled to keep an eye on him. The source suggested that Cruise's response to Pascal was markedly different than his approach to Pitt, while his rivalry with Brad had become a matter of managing public perception and mutual benefit. His feelings toward Pedro were tinged with a sense of urgency and frustration. The insider explained that Tom regarded himself and Brad as Hollywood royalty, both having spent decades building their legacies, so the industry's newfound fascination with Pascal seemed, to him, somewhat misplaced. The insider shared that Cruise's competitive nature made it difficult for him to simply accept the rise of a new favorite, and that he saw Pascal's success as a direct challenge to his own status. According to the source, Cruise was always paying attention to how up-and-coming actors were being discussed in the media and among industry insiders, and he was quick to notice when someone like Pedro began to draw comparisons to the greats. The source said that Cruise was not the type to stand idly by while the spotlight shifted, and that he was already thinking about how to reassert his dominance and remain at the forefront of Hollywood's elite. The insider noted that Cruise's rivalry with Pitt had evolved into a kind of unspoken agreement, where both benefited from the public perception of their competitive relationship, but the situation with Pedro was still in its early stages, and Tom was watching closely to see how things would play out. The source indicated that Cruise respected Pitt's accomplishments and understood the value of their joint publicity, but with Pascal, the dynamic was more adversarial, as Tom felt his own legacy was being challenged by someone who hadn't yet paid the same dues. The insider said that, in Tom's eyes, Hollywood was a place where longevity and achievement should be rewarded, and the rapid ascent of actors like Pascal was both impressive and irritating to established stars like himself. The source concluded that Cruz's determination to stay relevant and at the top of his game was as strong as ever, and that he would continue to seek out opportunities to remind the industry and audiences of his star power. Subscribe for more inside scoops on your favorite stars. The insider went on to explain that Tom's approach to his career had always been marked by an intense focus on staying ahead of the competition, and that he was constantly strategizing about how to maintain his position. The source remarked that Cruz had a knack for reinventing himself and finding new ways to capture the public's attention, whether through daring stunts, high-profile roles, or carefully curated public appearances. The insider said that Tom was quick to notice any shifts in the industry and was always ready to pivot in response to new challenges. The source shared that Cruz's willingness to embrace calculated risks and his relentless work ethic set him apart from many of his peers, but also contributed to his ongoing sense of rivalry with anyone perceived as a threat. The insider noted that Tom's relationship with Pitt, though marked by years of competition, had ultimately settled into a mutually beneficial arrangement, where both stars could capitalize on the intrigue and speculation surrounding their interactions. The source said that fans and the press loved to speculate about the nature of their rivalry, and that both actors understood the value of keeping the narrative alive. The insider pointed out that the dynamic between Cruz and Pitt was unique in that it combined real competitive instincts with an understanding of the business benefits that came from playing into the rivalry for public consumption. The source said that both men were adept at leveraging their star power and using their perceived competition to draw attention to their respective projects. The insider stated that, even when appearing to make amends or show support for one another, Tom and Brad were always thinking about how the moment could be used to boost their own brand. The source explained that this level of calculation was not uncommon in Hollywood, but that Cruz's ability to manage it so skillfully was part of what had kept him at the top for so long. The insider said that Tom was always looking for ways to stay ahead and was unafraid to adapt his approach as needed. The source shared that Cruz's attention had now shifted to Pascal, and that he was watching closely to see how Pedro would handle the pressures and expectations that came with newfound fame. The insider remarked that Tom believed longevity in the industry required more than just a breakout moment, and that he was curious to see if Pascal could sustain his momentum. The source added that Cruz's competitive nature meant he would not shy away from opportunities to outshine newcomers, and that he was always thinking several steps ahead. The insider stated that Tom's rivalry with Pitt had, in some ways, prepared him for the rise of other challengers, and that he was ready to face whatever the industry threw his way. Subscribe for more entertainment news and rare Hollywood insights. The source explained that Cruz's public gestures, such as attending Pitt's premiere and sharing a hug, were as much about optics as they were about any genuine desire for reconciliation. The insider said that these moments generated headlines and kept both stars in the public eye, which was always good for business. The source noted that, while fans might have hoped for a heartfelt truce, the reality was far more calculated. The insider said that Cruz understood the importance of maintaining a strong public image and was willing to play the game if it meant staying relevant. The source reiterated that, despite any appearances to the contrary, Tom's competitiveness never truly faded, and that he remained as driven as ever to be seen as a leading figure in Hollywood. The insider concluded that, as new stars like Pedro Pascal continued to rise, Cruz would remain vigilant and ready to defend his legacy, always seeking out ways to reaffirm his place at the top of the industry, and would not hesitate to engage in new rivalries if it meant keeping his name in the spotlight.